Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Activism, politics in a cold place, and a whole lot of media publicity. What is Greenpeace all about today? Is it a smug and self-promoting bully or a brave environmentalist group? Opinions vary, and at the very center of the debate surrounding organizations such as Greenpeace is the question whether they have the right to operate outside the law. To CrossTalk Greenpeace, I'm joined by Alexander Mercouris in London. He is a writer on legal affairs and an analyst. And in Washington, we cross to Mark Morano. He is the publisher of Climate Depot and a former staffer of the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. Alexander, if I can go to you first in London, I was reading the Daily Mail a couple of days ago, and they had an article about Greenpeace and Russia and the Arctic oil platform. And I must say that the article was rather pro-Greenpeace and very anti-Russia. And then I read the 70 or so comments at the end of the article, and my goodness, the article was very much out of touch with whoever wrote the article and the editorial line of that publication. A lot of people thought that Greenpeace has gone too far. It's a publicity stunt. They made sure there were many different kinds of nationalities on that operation to get maximum media effect. What do you think about this? I mean, because Greenpeace is doing this for publicity. Obviously, to what degree it's doing it for science and environmentalism, we can discuss that. Go ahead.
Yes, well, Greenpeace is a direct action organisation. They've been doing these sort of things for a very, very long time, way back into the 1970s. And I think it's true to say that it's always been controversial. An awful lot of people, both within and outside the ecological movement, are sceptical about some of the things that Greenpeace does. And I think some of the things that you probably saw, some of the comments you saw to that Daily Mail article reflect that. Having said that, it is, if you look, it has always seen itself as being at the vanguard of the ecological campaigning, and what it did in the Arctic with the Gazprom platform is consistent with that. And I don't think this is the first time Greenpeace is coming for this sort of criticism. Perhaps what is rather more surprising is that the Daily Mail should support Greenpeace rather than Russia. But that's another. Well, should support Greenpeace on this occasion. Usually the Daily Mail isn't very keen on Greenpeace, as far as I know.
Well, I can say the Daily Mail is very rarely keen on Russia. Mark, if I can go to you, I mean, again, you know, Greenpeace, it seems that in popular perception now, popular perception is that it is more of an action group, political action group, and less an environmental group.
Yes, it's chiefly known in the last couple of decades now as just an environmental pressure group whose basically sole existence at this point are cheap publicity stunts and this kind of what you'd call, you know, you could almost border on eco-terror is the phrase I would use, or just trespassing and law-breaking. You know, just in August, they went and destroyed golden rice crops in the Philippines. They destroyed a whole trial test of them. They don't have the concept of property rights. They don't have the concept of legality. The former co-founding member, Patrick Moore, the ecologist, has come out and basically said Greenpeace is acting immoral. And he left the organization back in the 80s because Greenpeace at that point was opposed to chlorinated water, some of the greatest public health advancements. So I think given what's happened with Greenpeace, it's almost become, even in our pop culture, it's becoming more and more sort of the butt of a joke. It's known as an extreme organization among the environmental pressure groups. It's probably known as one of the most extreme next to some of, you know, the other ones like the Animal Liberation Front and all that. But it's getting out there. And I think what Russia has done here is send a very clear signal that they're going to play a no-nonsense game with Greenpeace. Perhaps the pirate charges are a little bit much, but certainly not the other charges, the trespassing and violations. And it's very interesting to see Greenpeace sweat here. Let's just hope that what happened with France a few years back, France did, I guess, sunk the original ship that Greenpeace had, but then they were forced by some tribunal to pay $8 million to pay for it. Let's hope that doesn't happen with Russia. Stick to your guns here.
Alexander, I mean, one of the things, I mean, I guess kind of all of us are kind of children of Greenpeace. When I look at our ages here, I mean, I have nothing against, Greenpeace stopping people killing baby seals and protecting dolphins and porpoises. I mean, we all like that, okay, because we think that's senseless here. But isn't this really just a promotion? Now, you have to go to the next extreme to get more money from donors. It makes you feel good inside that, you're helping these people that are helping baby seals, essentially.
Well, can I just say, I think we should be careful what language is used. I don't think what happened in the Arctic is eco-terrorism or any sort of terrorism. And I think we should be very precise about this. Now, I agree the Russian authorities felt very strongly that they need to make a very strong point here. And one can entirely see why development of the Arctic is very much in Russia's economic interests. Russia is entirely within its rights legally to do what it is doing in the Arctic. And there's no question at all, in my opinion, that what Greenpeace did is it broke the law. And Greenpeace does regularly, deliberately break the law. And I'm not certainly someone who generally countenances breaking the law. Having said that, Greenpeace generally has been fairly careful to balance, to know how far to go with these sort of things. And I feel that with this particular incident in the Arctic, it again went perhaps further than it should have done legally, but it didn't really do anything particularly violent or extremely criminal. And I think, on the other side, I think the Russian authorities understand that perfectly well, which is why I think each side now having made its point, there will come a solution, and we will probably see the charges reduced, possibly these people pleading guilty to these lesser charges, and then this particular incident will close and we will move on.
Mark, I think it's very interesting.
That's my own personal feeling.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. But Mark, I think another part of the story that is so missed in mainstream media, and I haven't seen it really reported in any depth at all, is that Greenpeace did this in August 2012 also. And that time, on the platform, they got almost no resistance. The oil workers there didn't know what to do. There wasn't much security at all. And they were there for 15 hours with their posters and everything like that, and then they finally left of their own volition. And, well, there's a learning curve here. If they come and try to do that again, we will show them what they can expect. And I think this is part of the thing. If I go to Mark here, I think this is part of the strategy as well, Mark, because this is what happened before will not be repeated again. And, as was pointed out, this is a very important strategic industry for Russia. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well, oil is strategic for everyone at this point. And I think I want to agree with Alexander. I'm not alleging what they did here on this platform with eco-terror. I'm referring to more what the co-founder Patrick Moore said, what they did at the golden rice crops in the Philippines in August. That is more along the lines of eco-terror. But yes, I mean, what Greenpeace is, they're getting a curve here. What they've tried to do over the decades is pick cheap, easy, politically expedient targets where they're not going to get a lot of blowback. And I don't think they counted on Russia. I don't think they counted on your government being prepared and doing this to them. And I think Alexander's probably right again, and that the charges will probably be dropped, or at least they'll plead to lesser charges here. And I don't think the piracy is going to hold. But I think the idea of the message behind what Greenpeace is doing is what Patrick Moore, the founding member, has said. This is an anti-human agenda. Oil is the lifeblood of our modern civilization. Greenpeace is on record as trying to stop carbon-based energy, fossil fuels in the developing world, where 1.6 or so billion people don't have running water, electricity, don't have access to this. This is the real question. Why are wealthy white environmentalists, and by the way, a whole coalition of minority groups have accused Greenpeace and other environmental groups of being largely white and being essentially exclusionary racist organizations. Why are they denying carbon-based energy, the lifeblood of modern developed world, to the people at barely subsistence level? And I think That's the larger question here. Sure, it's a cheap publicity stunt to jump on a Russian oil rig and make this point, but why are they against oil? And how does this do for the powerless people in the developing world who don't have the voices, don't have running water, don't have electricity, have high infant mortality rates, have short life expectancy? This is where Greenpeace is on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of morality.
Alexander, if I can go back to you, I mean, it's again, I mean, it's kind of a cheap stunt because these are pictures. When you see these pictures of the oil rig and you know, and you have the activists, this is how they generate money, isn't it? This is what they get from their donors.
Well, of course, I mean, that is the nature of an organisation like this sort. I mean, a direct action organisation has to perform direct action if it is going to continue to get support and continue to get money. And I mean, there are a lot of criticisms of what Greenpeace does. A lot of people feel that Greenpeace does overstep the mark, and in fact that the reactions that it provokes are actually negative for the ecological movement generally. I think there's 2 points I want to make. Firstly, you were absolutely right to point out to the previous incident. The Russian authorities are not going to allow people like Greenpeace to enter the Arctic and harass the people who are doing their work there. That's absolutely clear, and that's what the Russian authorities were setting out to say on this occasion, and they've done it very, very convincingly. And I think Greenpeace, which is also a sophisticated organisation, will understand this. Now, Greenpeace, as an ecological body, wants to argue that there are problems about development in the Arctic. That's a legitimate point.
Fair.
Whatever view one has about oil and the necessity of oil and carbon and the rest, that there is a delicate ecosystem in the Arctic, and you know they have legitimate grounds to be concerned about that. I think what has happened is
Alexander,
each side has now
let me
made
jump
their
in
point.
here, gentlemen. We have to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Greenpeace. Stay with our team.
I see. I love it.
Comrades, soldiers, you're in the military now. No more joking anymore.
I've never been so tired in my life. Every day, we're being pushed to our absolute limits. Do you think it's gonna be easy? Fire! But everyone's desperate to prove that they belong with Russia's best of the best, the paratroopers. Honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to the end.
Look, can you stop filming? Because I've got nothing left. I don't know what to do here.
Wealthy British scion Zach Reynolds, investment activist
Markets, finance, scandal. Find out what's really happening to the global economy
with Max Kaiser. For a no-holds-barred look at the global financial headlines, tune in to Kaiser Report on RT.
In his secret laboratory, Tim Kirby was able to build the world's most sophisticated robot, which unfortunately doesn't give a darn about anything. Tim's mission? To teach his creation why it should care about humans and world events. This is Why You Should Care. Watch only on RT.com.
I love it. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Greenpeace. Okay, Mark, I'd like to go back to you in Washington. I agree with what Alexander had to say about being concerned about the environment in the Arctic. That's fair enough. Maybe it's an issue of tactics. But, you know, why isn't Greenpeace more interested in, like, Fukushima in Japan or what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico? I don't see they have a lot of activity going there. Or maybe they'd be afraid of the response of the governments involved. And they learned a lesson, I think we all would agree, that you're not going to mess with Russia when it's doing its legitimate business operations in a particular part of the world. Go ahead.
Yes, you have not seen them with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. You haven't seen them go after Iran for nuclear. You haven't seen them when Saddam Hussein was burning the oil fields. You didn't see Greenpeace activists in the 1990s going into Iraq and making any protests there. They're looking for cheap, easy points with very little blowback. Unfortunately, they may have picked the wrong target here. And yes, obviously the Arctic is a sensitive environmental area, but the point is Greenpeace would oppose it whether it's the Gulf of Mexico, whether it's in Russia, whether it's in the Arctic, and whether it's just about anywhere they're going to oppose this. And the technology, by the way, for Arctic drilling is dramatically improved and safer. The footprints are smaller. So the argument really isn't about the Arctic ecosystem for Greenpeace. It's about oil. They're having a war on modern energy, and they want to remake our society into this so-called renewable energy of solar and wind. And you don't hear Greenpeace going after windmills that are slaughtering birds. You don't hear them going after solar panels that are going into sensitive environmental areas like the Mojave Desert. They are very politically careful when they do this. And I think when I mentioned earlier that Greenpeace is on the edge, there's a poll here in America that says people, even if they care about the environment, don't like the image of environmentalists. So they don't call themselves environmentalists. And one of the large reasons is the antics of Greenpeace is the face of modern environmentalism. They pioneered it, and people are turning off to it in these kind of tactics.
It's interesting, Alexander, if I can go to you in London. I mean, Greenpeace itself is a corporation, and it's not very transparent, and it has many branches all over the world, but some countries its finances are very, very closed, and they've been under a lot of investigation. In 2005, by the way, the FBI investigated them for having possible connection with eco-terrorists. Not a very open operation.
Well, I'm sure that's true. The question, it seems to me, though, is if we come back to this particular incident, which is, was this different from the sort of things that Greenpeace has historically done? And I don't really think it was. What I think is really interesting about this particular thing is, yes, Russia in some ways is now a vulnerable target for this kind of activity. The reason Russia is a vulnerable target for these sort of activities is precisely because Russia is becoming a legally orderly, fairly open society. Greenpeace can't operate in countries which are dictatorships for fairly obvious reasons. It can only operate in countries like democracies, like Russia. And the important thing is that Russia is responding to this in, I think, a rather skillful and actually rather sophisticated way. They're saying, look, we will not let our people be harassed. At the same time, we're going to actually use the courts and the law. And contrary to what some people say, I would say that the actual legal case against Greenpeace under Article 227 of the Russian Criminal Code is actually quite a strong one. I can see that there are defences there, but it is a legal response to a challenge.
Okay, Mark, if I can go back to you, I mean, it certainly is a challenge here. I mean, Greenpeace wanted to go eye to eye with Gazprom, Russia's energy company here, and it looks like this time Gazprom is one that's won out here and under law, and it looks like Greenpeace here has blinked. They miscalculated this time.
Oh, I think they absolutely did. The fact that they're still detained, the fact that their boat's been seized, I think this is not what they expected. They expected a slap on the wrist, go about their business, and this is all about their fundraising letters. They want to send these maudlin, sappy appeals to people in the mail saying, here's what we did, we must stop this, stop Russian Arctic drilling immediately, people will write a big check. This complicates the issue, makes Greenpeace look like they may have overstepped, so it's not the best PR thing, unless they can try to demonize Russia and claim they're at the hands of, Putin and they're being unfairly treated, which I haven't seen yet. The piracy charge, as I mentioned, might be a bit much.
Most likely dropped.
But I think
most likely.
And most likely dropped. Yes, I agree. So I think what's going to happen here is Greenpeace, their president, one of their executive directors, just recently came out. Sure.
Go ahead, Mark. Finish up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, one of their executive directors came out and said that they're going to have to put their lives on the line for climate justice, in his words, climate justice. So they're sounding in some ways more defiant. I was at the Keystone Pipeline protest here in Washington, D.C. There were protesters with banners saying, we will stop the Canadian pipeline to the U.S. by any means necessary. And I interviewed them. So there's a strain of the environmental movement that's getting more and more radicalized against fossil fuels. And I think Russia taking these measures today was sending a message that at least they're not going to take these PR stunts that Greenpeace is doing, because they may end up, it's sort of that slippery slope, they may end up leading to more serious attacks by other more extreme green groups.
Exactly. Alexander, you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
You see, what I wanted to say is I think the point that Mark is making about the carbon issues is actually an interesting one, because I think partly what's been happening is that a couple of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, a global warming, carbon issue, all of these things were very much at the top of the global political agenda. With the economic crisis and with all kinds of other problems going on around the world, that's fallen back a bit. And I think what we are seeing is a certain escalation on the part of certain sections of the ecological movement, with Greenpeace being somewhat in the vanguard, trying, if you like, to try and increase again the attention that this issue is getting. And I think some of the overblown language is in fact consistent with that. However, one must always be careful to distinguish between what people say and what they actually do. It's one thing for them to say, we're going to do anything to stop something happening. Provided they remain within the law, people will say things, but one shouldn't go after them unless they break the law. If they do break the law, then it is the law that ought to be used to deal with them, which is what we're seeing in Russia now. I think, as I said, I come back to this, I think the Russians have handled this matter well. An extraordinary contrast, if you like, to what happened way back in the 1980s, when the French responded to a challenge from Greenpeace by planting bombs inside boats and killing people and doing terrible things. Or if in some ways, the Russians would have been wrong to have arrested this ship before on the high seas, before they did anything. They waited for them to do something. They then acted. And in fact, they're acting in a legal way. And I think that's something that one should note and commend and recognize.
Mark, is Greenpeace in competition with these other groups? Because it seems to me, there's a limited amount of publicity you can get there, and Greenpeace is making a pitch for it, because there are far more extreme groups than Greenpeace out there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole environmental pressure groups, there was a recent analysis by David Horowitz, $3.5 billion, I believe, annual is what the size of what we call the big green establishment is. And that's a 37-to-1 advantage over your free market groups, seen as collectively as a free market group sort of in opposition. So this is huge business. There's a lot of money and a lot of intense competition. So Greenpeace has always had the edge of being willing to do the civil disobedience, to do the stunts. And by the way, way, just a clarification on the French incident from years ago. If they had planted bombs and the French government acted in a truly outrageous way, I'm not defending what they did and saying that was good. I was making a rhetorical point earlier about, Russia had better be careful that it doesn't happen. But I think what Greenpeace is doing, this is all about fundraising. It's all about media attention.
Alexander, go ahead. In London, jump in.
What I was going to say, I never for a moment thought Mark was justifying what the French did.
Well, me too.
the point is, Greenpeace is part of a very large ecological movement. Yeah, there's a big spectrum of groups within it. And Greenpeace has always been at the more militant edge. It is not as militant or as some groups, and there are some people within the ecological movement who do go beyond the pale, frankly. I think Greenpeace is actually clever enough to know how far to go most of the time, and I think they will on this occasion too. Mm-hmm.
Mark, going further now when looking at the Arctic and other areas here, do you think that Greenpeace is going to be a little bit more skittish in other groups when they confront countries? They'll say, we're going to stand our ground?
Yeah, I think they'll be careful. I mean, in the U.S., they have pretty much free reign. They know nothing will happen. Canada, I would say, is probably similar. Any Western democracy is going to be easy free reign for Greenpeace and these kind of stunts. The problem really is Greenpeace activism has led to things like the World Bank now trying to put a moratorium on coal-fired power plants in Africa. President Obama is not going to support coal-fired power plants. People that need carbon-based energy the most to rise out of poverty aren't getting it. And that, to me, is the most outrageous thing that Greenpeace has done. So they go after the most powerless people without a voice, without energy, basically, and they could have the most impact there. But I think they're going to continue to do what they do, but I think they'll be a little bit more cautious because they don't like this kind of a hiccup here, especially depending on how it turns out PR-wise. Again, if Greenpeace can demonize the Russian government to the point where they were been unjustly and they could be the victim here, it may turn out for them in the end. I don't think that's going to happen.
Gentlemen, we've run out of time here. All about Greenpeace and fundraising here. Many thanks to my guests in London and in Washington. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, CrossTalk rules. I love it.